The next day, Amara told Dr. Chen yes. Yes, they could publish the essay. Yes, she was ready for other people to read her truth. Yes, she was brave enough to be that visible. The literary magazine came out in December, right before winter break. Amara saw students reading it in the hallways, in the cafeteria, in the library. She tried not to watch their reactions, but sometimes she couldn't help it. Some students looked thoughtful. Others looked uncomfortable. A few looked confused, like they had never considered that life could be hard for their classmates in ways they didn't see. The responses started coming in through email and social media. Some were positive. A girl from her history class sent a message saying, "I felt the same way about my life but didn't know how to say it. Thank you for finding the words." A student from another grade wrote, "Your essay made me realize I've been taking things for granted. Thank you for opening my eyes." But not all responses were kind. Someone left a printed copy of the essay in her locker with "victim" written across it in red marker. A few students made comments about people who can't stop complaining. Someone created a fake social media account and sent her messages about being ungrateful. Amara's hands shook when she saw those messages. For a moment, she wondered if publishing the essay had been a mistake. But then more messages came, real ones from real people. A sophomore boy wrote, "My family is struggling too. I thought I was the only one. Your essay made me feel less alone." A senior girl said, "I had Ms. Henderson 2 years ago and she made me feel like my perspective was wrong too. Thank you for speaking up. You helped me realize it wasn't just me. Teachers reached out too." Mrs. Kim from the English department asked if Amara would be willing to talk to a committee about improving how teachers assess student work. 2 other teachers thanked her for bringing attention to bias they hadn't recognized in their own teaching. "You've made us think harder about fairness," one wrote. "That's a gift." The local newspaper heard about the story and wanted to write an article. Dr. Chen asked Amara if she would be willing to be interviewed. Amara said yes, but only if they didn't use her full name or show her photo. She agreed to be Amara S., a student at Lincoln High. The article came out in January. It talked about implicit bias in education, about the importance of diverse perspectives, about students finding the courage to speak up against unfairness. After the article, more things started happening. The school board invited Amara to speak at a meeting about student advocacy. She was terrified, but she did it. She talked about what it felt like to be invisible, about how silence wasn't protection, it was erasure, about how one teacher's bias had almost convinced her that her truth didn't matter. The board members listened. Some took notes. One woman in the back row wiped away tears. In February, Amara received an email that changed everything. It was from the director of a summer writing program at a nearby college. "I read your essay in the Lincoln High Literary Magazine," the email said. "Your voice is powerful and your story is important. I would like to offer you a full scholarship to our 6-week intensive writing program this summer. We need voices like yours in the world of literature." Amara read the email 3 times, not believing it was real. A full scholarship. 6 weeks of writing workshops with real writers, all because she had refused to stay silent. All because she had insisted her truth was valid even when someone with power said it wasn't. She showed her parents the email. Her mother cried. Her father picked her up and spun her around like he used to when she was little. Miguel and Rosa cheered. "See?" her father said, still speaking Spanish. "Your voice matters. We always knew it. Now the world knows it too." The spring semester brought more changes. The student advocacy program that Dr. Chen had mentioned became real. Amara was asked to be one of the founding members. She met with other students who had experienced bias or unfair treatment. They created guidelines for how to report problems. They worked with teachers to develop better assessment practices. They organized workshops on cultural competency for both staff and students. It was hard work. Some people resisted. Some teachers felt defensive. Some students didn't want to hear about bias or privilege or fairness, but slowly, gradually, things began to shift. More diverse voices were heard in classrooms. More perspectives were valued in discussions. More truths were recognized as legitimate, even when they were uncomfortable. Amara never became popular in the traditional sense. She still ate lunch alone sometimes. She still wore the same rotation of clothes. She still lived in a tiny apartment and worked hard and worried about money. But she wasn't invisible anymore. She had learned that visibility wasn't about everyone liking you or everyone agreeing with you. It was about refusing to be erased. about insisting that your story mattered, about speaking your truth even when your voice shook. In May, at the school's academic award ceremony, Amara received an award for courage and advocacy. She had to walk up on stage in front of hundreds of people, teachers and students and parents. Her hands were sweating and her heart was pounding. But when she got to the podium, she looked out at all those faces and felt something unexpected. Not fear, strength. A year ago, she began, her voice quiet but steady. I was invisible. I stayed silent because I thought that would keep me safe. I made myself small because I believed that's what I had to do to survive. But silence didn't protect me. It just made me disappear. She paused, finding her courage. When I finally spoke up, it was terrifying. I didn't know if anyone would listen. I didn't know if anything would change. But I learned something important. Sometimes you have to speak even when you're scared. Sometimes you have to tell your truth even when people say it's wrong. Sometimes you have to refuse to be invisible even when being seen is hard. She looked directly at the audience. My story isn't special. There are students in this school right now who feel invisible, who think their voices don't matter, who stay silent because they're afraid. I want them to know something. Your story matters. Your truth is valid. Your voice deserves to be heard, and if you're brave enough to speak, I promise you there are people who will listen. The applause was loud and long. Amara saw her parents in the audience, her father's face proud, her mother's eyes wet with tears. She saw Miguel and Rosa cheering wildly. She saw Mr. Thompson giving her a thumbs up. She saw other students, ones she didn't even know, standing and clapping. But the moment that mattered most came after the ceremony. A young girl, maybe a freshman, came up to her nervously. She was small and quiet and looked like she wanted to disappear. I read your essay, the girl said quietly, and I just wanted to say thank you. I have a teacher who makes me feel invisible too. I was going to just stay quiet until I graduated. But after hearing you speak, I think maybe I should say something. Maybe my voice matters too. Amara looked at this girl and saw herself from a year ago, small, scared, silent. She put her hand on the girl's shoulder. Your voice absolutely matters, she said firmly. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. And if you need help speaking up, I'm here. You're not alone. That's when Amara realized the full weight of what she had done. By refusing to stay silent, she hadn't just changed her own situation. She had created space for others to speak. She had shown that one voice, even a quiet one, even a scared one, could matter, could create change, could make things better for the people who came after. On the last day of school, Amara cleaned out her locker. She found old papers and forgotten pens and the crumpled lunch bag from months ago. At the bottom was the original copy of her essay, the one covered in Ms. Henderson's red ink. She almost threw it away, but then she stopped. She folded it carefully and put it in her backpack, not as a reminder of pain, as a reminder of courage, of the day she decided her truth was worth fighting for, of the moment she stopped being invisible. When she returned home at the end of summer, she was different, not just because of the writing program, though that had changed her, but because she had learned the most important lesson of all. Silence is a choice. Invisibility is a choice. She had spent most of her life choosing them because they felt safer. But safe wasn't the same as good. Safe wasn't the same as right. Safe wasn't the same as true. As junior year started, Amara walked into Lincoln High with her head up. She still wore simple clothes. She still worried about money. She still worked hard and helped her siblings and carried the weight of her family's struggles. But she wasn't invisible anymore. She had found her voice. And now that she had found it, she had learned how to use it. Not just for herself, for anyone who needed someone to speak when they couldn't, for anyone who felt erased or dismissed or told their truth didn't matter. The poor student girl had stayed silent for so long, but when her racist teacher graded her truth as wrong, something inside her refused to accept it. And in that refusal, in that moment of saying, no, my story matters, everything changed. Not just for her, for everyone who would come after her, everyone who needed to know that speaking up, even when your voice shakes, even when you're scared, even when you're not sure anyone will listen, is always, always worth it, because truth matters. Justice matters. And sometimes one voice is all it takes to start changing the world. 3 months passed since that first encounter, and Tyler's group had made the shop their regular weekend stop. Every Saturday afternoon, like clockwork, Maya would hear the rumble of their expensive motorcycles pulling into the parking lot. The visits had become a ritual of humiliation that she had learned to endure, but each week the mockery seemed to get worse. Maya tried her best to ignore them. She would put on her earbuds and pretend to be focused on her work. But they always found ways to get her attention. They would rev their engines loudly right next to where she was working. They would ask her father stupid questions just to waste his time. They would stand around making comments about everything in the shop, always loud enough for Maya to hear. "This place smells like a garbage dump," Brandon said one day, wrinkling his nose dramatically. "How can anyone work in here?" "Maybe when you spend all your time around oil and grease, you stop noticing the smell," Jessica replied, flipping her perfect hair. Just like Maya probably doesn't even realize how dirty she always looks. Tyler was the worst. He seemed to take personal pleasure in thinking up new ways to insult Maya. He commented on her clothes, her hair, her appearance, and her intelligence. He questioned whether she had actually finished any repairs or if her father had to redo all her work. He made jokes about her never having a boyfriend because no one would want to date a girl who looked and smelled like a mechanic. Maya's friends from school had started noticing changes in her. She was always tired. She rarely joined them for anything after school anymore. When they asked her what was wrong, she just said she was busy helping her father. She didn't tell them about Tyler and his group. She felt embarrassed, like admitting it would make it real. Like it would mean she was actually as worthless as they said she was. Her father noticed too. Carlos watched his daughter become quieter and more withdrawn. He saw how she tensed up every Saturday afternoon. He suggested closing the shop early on weekends to avoid them, but Maya refused. She said they shouldn't have to change their business hours because of some bratty kids. Then came the Saturday that changed everything. It was a hot afternoon in August. Maya was organizing her toolbox, carefully arranging her wrenches, sockets, and screwdrivers in the exact order she liked. She had a system that helped her work efficiently. Every tool had its place. This toolbox had been a gift from her father on her 15th birthday, and it was one of her most precious possessions. Tyler and his friends arrived earlier than usual that day. Maya heard them come in, but she kept her back turned, focused on her tools. She heard their footsteps getting closer. She heard them laughing about something. Then suddenly she felt a hard bump against her side. The toolbox went flying off the workbench. It hit the concrete floor with a loud crash. Wrenches, sockets, screwdrivers, and other tools scattered everywhere across the floor. Some rolled under motorcycles. Some slid into corners. The sound echoed through the shop like an explosion. Maya spun around. Tyler stood there with his hands in his pockets, a fake expression of surprise on his face. "Oops," he said slowly, dragging out the word. "I didn't see that there. Maybe if you spent less time playing mechanic and more time making yourself look presentable, you'd notice things in your way, like a normal girl would." His friends burst out laughing. Jessica actually had tears running down her face from laughing so hard. Brandon was doubled over, holding his stomach. Another kid was recording the whole thing on his phone, probably planning to post it on social media. Maya felt something break inside her. Not her spirit exactly, but something that had been holding back her anger. She felt her face get hot. Her hands formed fists at her sides. She took a step toward Tyler, ready to say or do something she might regret. But then her father's voice cut through the noise. "Get out!" Carlos had come out of the office, and his face was darker than Maya had ever seen it. "Get out of my shop right now." Tyler's smile faded a little, but he tried to keep his cool attitude. "We're potential customers, sir. You can't just kick us out." "You've never been customers," Carlos said, his voice low and dangerous. "You come here to mock my daughter. You waste our time. You disrespect our business. I'm done being patient. Leave now, or I call the police for harassment." Tyler looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Carlos's eyes made him change his mind. "Whatever," he said, trying to sound like he didn't care. "This place is a dump anyway. Come on, guys. Let's go somewhere that doesn't smell like failure." They left, their motorcycles making as much noise as possible as they rode away. After they were gone, the shop felt very quiet. Maya stood frozen in the same spot, staring at her scattered tools on the ground. She felt Carlos's hand on her shoulder, but she couldn't look at him. If she looked at him, she might start crying, and she refused to cry over those horrible people. "Mija," Carlos said gently, "let me help you pick these up." "No," Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll do it myself." She knelt down and started picking up her tools one by one. Each wrench, each socket, each screwdriver. Carlos watched her for a moment, then quietly went back to the office, giving her space. Maya worked slowly, methodically, putting everything back in its proper place. But her mind was racing. She thought about all the times they had insulted her, all the laughter, all the mean comments. She thought about how powerless she had felt, how small they made her feel. But mostly, she thought about the storage room and the project waiting inside it. After she finished organizing her toolbox, Maya didn't go back to work on the scheduled repairs. Instead, she walked straight to the storage room, unlocked it, and went inside. She closed the door behind her and just stood there, breathing hard, trying to calm down. The Honda CB750 sat in the middle of the room with her partially completed road sense system attached to it. Surrounding it were boxes of electronic components, circuit boards, sensors, and computer parts. Her notebooks were stacked on the table, full of calculations and designs. This had been her private project, something she worked on slowly in her spare time. She had been telling herself there was no rush, that she could take as long as she needed. But now everything had changed. The humiliation of that afternoon had lit a fire inside her that wouldn't go out. She didn't just want to finish her project anymore. She needed to. She needed to prove to Tyler, to his friends, to everyone who had ever underestimated her, that she was worth something, that she could do something none of them could do. Maya pulled out her phone and started searching. She found what she was looking for quickly. The Regional Youth Motorcycle Exhibition. It was an annual event where young people showcased their motorcycles and innovations. There were categories for Best Custom Bike, Best Restoration, and Best Innovation. Judges included engineers from major motorcycle companies, professional riders, and industry experts. Winners got trophies, recognition, and sometimes even job offers or sponsorships. Tyler and his friends went to this exhibition every year. Maya had heard them talking about it before. They always won awards for their expensive custom bikes. Their parents hired professional mechanics and designers to make their motorcycles look amazing. Tyler had won the custom bike category 2 years in a row. Maya checked the date of the next exhibition. 6 weeks away. Could she finish RoadSense in 6 weeks? The system was maybe 60% complete. She still needed to refine the sensors, improve the computer programming, test everything thoroughly, and solve at least a dozen technical problems she had been putting off. 6 weeks. It seemed impossible. She would have to work constantly. She would have to give up sleep, give up any free time, focus every single moment on this project. But as she looked at the motorcycle and then at her scattered notes, Maya felt a determination she had never felt before. She sat down at her work table and opened her main notebook. She started making a list of everything she needed to do. She wrote down every component she needed to acquire, every test she needed to run, every problem she needed to solve. The list filled 3 full pages. Then she started making calls. First, she called her school and asked about their policy for excused absences for project work. They told her she could apply for independent study credit if she had a faculty sponsor. She immediately thought of Mr. Harrison, her physics teacher who had always encouraged her interest in engineering. Next, she needed money. The components she required cost thousands of dollars, and she only had about $300 saved from her part-time work. She couldn't ask her father. The shop barely made enough to cover bills. She needed another solution. Maya remembered a customer who came to the shop occasionally. Mrs. Chen was an older woman who owned a beautiful vintage motorcycle. She had retired from a career in engineering and always seemed interested in Maya's technical knowledge. Whenever she brought her bike in for service, she would stay and talk to Maya about mechanical designs and innovations. She treated Maya like an equal, like someone whose opinion mattered. It was getting late, but Maya decided to take a chance. She found Mrs. Chen's number in her father's customer files and called her. The phone rang 4 times and Maya almost hung up. Then she heard Mrs. Chen's voice. "Hello, Mrs. Chen? This is Maya Rodriguez from Rodriguez Motorcycle Repair." Maya sat in Mrs. Chen's living room, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. She had brought her main notebook, the one filled with technical drawings and calculations. For the next hour, she explained everything about RoadSense to Mrs. Chen. She explained how the sensors would scan the road ahead, how the computer would process the information, and how the system would adjust the motorcycle's suspension automatically. Mrs. Chen listened carefully, asking questions that showed she really understood what Maya was trying to build. She asked about the sensor range, the processing speed, and the power requirements. She asked about safety features and fail-safe mechanisms. These were exactly the kinds of questions a real engineer would ask. When Maya finished explaining, Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment. She picked up the notebook and slowly turned through the pages, studying the drawings. Finally, she looked up at Maya with serious eyes. "This is ambitious work," Mrs. Chen said. "Very ambitious. Maybe too ambitious for one person working alone with limited resources." Maya felt her heart sink. She had hoped Mrs. Chen would be encouraging, not tell her it was impossible. But then Mrs. Chen smiled. "However, I didn't get where I am in my career by thinking small. What you're designing could actually work. The question is whether you can build it in 6 weeks with limited funding." She paused. "Tell me honestly, Maya, how much money do you have for this project?" $300, Maya admitted quietly. "I know it's not nearly enough," Mrs. Chen nodded. "The components you need will cost thousands. The gyroscopic sensors alone are expensive. The microprocessors you'll need are not cheap, and you'll need multiple sets of everything for testing and backups." She tapped the notebook. "But I think I can help with that." Maya looked up quickly. "Really, how?" "I'm retired, but I'm not poor," Mrs. Chen said with a slight smile. "And I'm bored. I spent 40 years as an engineer, and I miss working on interesting problems. Your road sense system is an interesting problem." She leaned forward. "I want to invest in your project. I'll provide the funding you need for components. In exchange, I want 2 things. First, I want to be your technical advisor. I'll help you solve problems and avoid mistakes. Second, if RoadSense ever becomes a real product that makes money, I want a small percentage of the profits." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You really want to help me?" "I really do," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "I see something special in you, Maya. You remind me of myself at your age. I had ideas but no support. If someone had believed in me back then, I could have accomplished so much more so much faster. I want to be that person for you." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "Thank you is plenty," Mrs. Chen said. "Now let's get to work. We have 6 weeks, which means we don't have time to waste. First, we need to make a complete list of everything you need. Then I'll start ordering components. Meanwhile, you need to set up a proper workspace." That afternoon, Mrs. Chen came to the shop to see Maya's storage room. She walked around slowly, examining everything. Then she nodded with approval. "This will work, but we need better lighting and more organization. Also, you'll need a proper computer for programming and simulations. I have an old engineering laptop you can use." Over the next 2 days, they transformed the storage room into a real development lab. Mrs. Chen brought equipment from her own home. She brought a better workbench, proper lighting, a laptop computer, and several tool sets that Maya had never even heard of. She also brought a large whiteboard for tracking progress and solving problems. By Monday morning, Maya had everything she needed to really begin. Mrs. Chen had ordered all the components online, paying extra for fast shipping. The first boxes would arrive in 2 days. Maya had also talked to Mr. Harrison at school, and he had agreed to sponsor her for independent study credit. This meant she could leave school early 3 days a week to work on her project. The real work began. Maya's daily schedule became exhausting. She would wake up at 6 in the morning and go to school. She attended her morning classes, ate a quick lunch, then left at noon to go to the shop. She would work on RoadSense until 6 in the evening, when regular customers started coming in for repairs. She would help her father with repairs until the shop closed at 8. Then she would go back to the storage room and work on RoadSense until midnight or later. Mrs. Chen came to the shop 3 times a week to check on Maya's progress and provide guidance. She reviewed Maya's code, checked her calculations, and suggested improvements. She also made sure Maya was taking care of herself, forcing her to take short breaks and eat proper meals. The first week was spent on the sensor array. Maya had to mount multiple sensors on the motorcycle in positions where they could scan the road effectively, without being damaged or looking ugly. This was harder than she expected. Every position she tried had some problem. If the sensors were too low, they might hit the ground. If they were too high, they couldn't scan effectively. If they were in the front, they were vulnerable to impact. She tried 15 different configurations before finding one that worked. The sensors were mounted in a protective housing that extended slightly from the front wheel guard. It looked a bit unusual, but it was functional and reasonably protected. The second week focused on the computer system. This was the brain of RoadSense. It needed to receive data from all the sensors, process it instantly, and make decisions about how to adjust the suspension. Maya had to write hundreds of lines of code. She had learned programming on her own from online tutorials. But this was much more complex than anything she had done before. Mrs. Chen helped her understand advanced concepts like real-time data processing and machine learning algorithms. They worked together on making the code efficient enough to run on a small computer that could fit on a motorcycle. Every line of code had to be perfect. One mistake could cause the entire system to fail. Maya's eyes hurt from staring at the computer screen for hours. Her back ached from sitting in the same position. Her fingers developed calluses from typing so much, but slowly the code came together. The computer could receive sensor data. It could identify different types of road hazards. It could calculate the necessary suspension adjustments. The third week brought the first major crisis. Maya finished installing all the components on the Honda CB750. Everything was connected. The system powered on successfully. The sensors worked. The computer processed data, but when she tested the suspension adjustment feature, nothing happened. The suspension didn't move at all. Maya spent an entire day checking every connection, every wire, every component. Everything seemed fine. The computer was sending the correct signals, but the suspension still wouldn't adjust. She felt panic rising in her chest. 3 weeks had passed. She only had 3 weeks left. If she couldn't solve this problem, the entire project would fail. That evening, Mrs. Chen came to the shop and found Maya sitting on the floor of the storage room, surrounded by wires and parts, looking defeated. "What's wrong?" Mrs. Chen asked. Maya explained the problem. Mrs. Chen listened carefully, then said, "Show me your power calculations." Maya pulled out her notebook and showed her the page where she had calculated how much power the system would need. Mrs. Chen studied it for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "Here's your problem. You calculated the power needed for the sensors and computer, but you forgot to account for the power needed for the suspension actuators. They need much more power than you're providing." Maya felt stupid. It was such a basic mistake. "How did I miss that?" "Because you're working 16 hours a day on almost no sleep," Mrs. Chen said kindly. "Your brain is exhausted. This is exactly why you need someone to check your work." She put her hand on Maya's shoulder. "Don't be so hard on yourself. Even experienced engineers make mistakes when they're tired. We'll fix this." They spent that night recalculating the power requirements and redesigning the electrical system. By 2 in the morning, they had a solution. Maya would need a bigger battery and a more efficient power distribution system. Mrs. Chen ordered the parts immediately, paying extra for overnight shipping. 2 days later, Maya installed the new power system. When she tested it again, the suspension moved smoothly, responding perfectly to the computer's commands. Maya actually shouted with joy when she saw it work. Her father came running from the main shop, worried something was wrong. When Maya explained that she had solved the problem, Carlos hugged her tightly, proud of his daughter even though he didn't fully understand what she was building. Week 4 was dedicated to programming the computer to recognize different types of hazards. Maya had to teach the system how to identify potholes, oil slicks, gravel, wet pavement, and other dangers. This required creating a database of sensor readings for each type of hazard. She spent hours riding around the city on the Honda, deliberately going over different road surfaces while the sensors collected data. She rode through construction zones to collect data on gravel and debris. She found wet roads after rain. She even poured oil on a section of empty parking lot to test the system's ability to detect slippery surfaces. Mrs. Chen helped her process all this data and create algorithms that could identify patterns. It was tedious work. Every new type of hazard required hours of data collection and programming. But gradually the system became smarter. It learned to tell the difference between a small bump and a dangerous pothole. It learned to recognize when the road was too slippery for normal riding. By the end of week 4, RoadSense could identify and respond to 15 different types of road hazards. When the sensors detected something dangerous, the system would adjust the suspension within milliseconds. It would also send a warning to the rider through vibrations in the handlebars, getting stronger as the danger got closer. Week 5 brought the testing phase. This was both the most exciting and the most dangerous part of the project. Maya needed to test RoadSense in real-world conditions to make sure it worked properly and safely. She couldn't just test it in empty parking lots anymore. She needed to ride on actual roads with real traffic and real hazards. She started carefully, riding early in the morning when traffic was light. The first few tests went well. Road sense detected potholes and adjusted the suspension smoothly. The warnings worked perfectly. Maya felt confident and started testing in more challenging conditions. Then disaster struck. It was a Wednesday morning, and Maya was testing in an industrial area near the shop. She rode over a section of rough pavement at about 20 miles per hour. Suddenly, the suspension locked up completely. The motorcycle became rigid, unable to absorb bumps. Maya hit a raised crack in the pavement and lost control. Everything happened fast. The motorcycle went sideways. Maya tried to correct, but it was too late. She and the bike slid across the pavement. She had been wearing a helmet and protective gear, but the impact was still brutal. She felt the rough concrete scraping against her arm and hip. She heard the terrible sound of metal grinding on pavement. The motorcycle finally stopped sliding. Maya lay on the ground for a moment, trying to assess if she was seriously hurt. She could move her arms and legs. That was good. But her left arm burned terribly, and her hip felt like someone had hit it with a hammer. Carlos had been watching from his truck nearby, as he always did when Maya tested the system. He saw the crash and came running immediately. His face was white with fear as he reached Maya. "Don't move," he said urgently. "Stay still until we know you're okay." But Maya was already trying to sit up. The adrenaline in her body made everything feel distant and unreal. "I'm okay, Papa," she said, though her voice shook. "Help me up." Carlos carefully helped her stand. Maya's left arm was bleeding where the concrete had scraped away skin. Her hip hurt badly, but she could walk. Nothing felt broken. She looked at the Honda lying on its side a few feet away. The road sense system looked damaged. One of the sensor housings had cracked. Wires were exposed. She felt tears starting to form, not from physical pain but from frustration and fear. "We're going to the hospital," Carlos said firmly. "Papa, I'm fine."
"I just have some scrapes. Maya, you crashed a motorcycle."
"You're going to the hospital." End of discussion. At the emergency room, a doctor examined Maya thoroughly. She had road rash on her left arm, meaning the top layer of skin had been scraped off over a large area. She had a deep bruise on her hip that would hurt for weeks, but nothing was broken or seriously damaged. The doctor cleaned her wounds, which hurt worse than the actual crash, and bandaged her arm. "You were lucky," the doctor said. "Motorcycle accidents can be much worse. Always wear your protective gear." "I was wearing gear," Maya said. "That's why I'm okay." When they got back to the shop, Mrs. Chen was already there. Carlos had called her from the hospital. Her face showed concern and something else that Maya couldn't quite identify. Was it disappointment? "Sit down," Mrs. Chen said gently. Maya sat on a bench in the main shop. Her father went to get her water. Mrs. Chen sat next to her and looked at her seriously. "Tell me exactly what happened." Maya explained the crash in detail. How the suspension had suddenly locked up. How she had lost control. How fast everything had happened. Mrs. Chen listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to say something you probably don't want to hear," Mrs. Chen finally said. "You need to stop this project." Maya felt like she had been punched in the stomach. "What? No. I can fix whatever went wrong. I just need to figure out what caused the lockup. Maya, you could have been killed today. If you had been going faster, or if you hadn't been wearing protective gear, you could have died. Is winning at some exhibition worth dying for?" "It's not about the exhibition," Maya said, feeling tears coming again. "It's about proving that I'm not just some stupid girl with greasy hands. It's about showing everyone that I can do something important." "And who are you trying to prove this to?" Mrs. Chen asked. "Those bratty teenagers who make fun of you? They're not worth risking your life for." "It's not just them," Maya said, wiping her eyes. "It's everyone. Everyone who looks at me and sees someone worthless. Someone who will never amount to anything. I need to show them they're wrong." Mrs. Chen sighed. She put her arm around Maya's shoulders, careful not to touch her injured arm. "Listen to me. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're already brilliant. You're already valuable. Whether or not you finish road sense doesn't change that." "But I've come so far," Maya said. "I only have 2 weeks left. I can't give up now." Carlos had been standing nearby, listening. He came over and knelt in front of Maya. "Mija, I'm proud of you no matter what you do. But Mrs. Chen is right. This is too dangerous. I can't watch you risk your life like this." Maya looked at her father's worried face. She looked at Mrs. Chen's concerned expression. She understood why they were scared. She was scared too. Her arm hurt. Her hip hurt. Every movement reminded her how badly things could have gone. But then she thought about Tyler's mocking smile. She thought about Jessica's cruel laughter. She thought about all the times she had felt small and worthless. And she thought about the motorcyclist who had crashed near their shop, the one who had inspired her to create road sense in the first place. How many other people could be saved if her system worked? I need to figure out what went wrong, Maya said quietly but firmly. Not to continue testing necessarily, but to understand the failure. If I don't know what caused the lockup, then everything I've built is worthless anyway. Mrs. Chen studied Maya's face for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, we'll examine the system and identify the failure point. After that, we'll decide together what to do next. But you promise me no more testing until we know exactly what happened. Agreed? Agreed, Maya said. That afternoon, despite her injuries, Maya went to the storage room. She and Mrs. Chen carefully removed the damaged components from the Honda and brought them to the work table. They spent hours examining every wire, every connection, every piece of the system. Finally, Mrs. Chen found the problem. She held up a small connector that Maya had soldered weeks earlier. Look at this. See how the solder joint is cracked? It failed under vibration. When the connection broke, the computer lost communication with the suspension actuator. The system's safety protocol locked the suspension rigid when it detected a communication failure. Maya felt a mix of emotions. Relief that the problem was identified, anger at herself for doing sloppy work, embarrassment that such a basic mistake had nearly caused a serious accident. I soldered that connection at 2 in the morning, Maya said. I was so tired I could barely see straight. Exactly, Mrs. Chen said. This is what happens when you push yourself too hard. You make mistakes, dangerous mistakes. She put the connector down and looked at Maya seriously. I'm not going to let you continue working like this. It's not safe and it's not smart. From now on, you work no more than 10 hours per day, and you must take 1 full day off every week to rest. But I only have 2 weeks left, Maya protested. Then maybe you don't finish in time for the exhibition, Mrs. Chen said. Maybe you finish a month later or 2 months later. Road sense is still valuable even if it's not ready for this particular event. Maya started to argue but stopped. Mrs. Chen was right. She had been so focused on the deadline, so obsessed with proving herself at the exhibition where Tyler would be, that she had stopped thinking clearly. She had pushed herself to the point of making dangerous mistakes. Okay, Maya finally said. You're right. I'll be more careful. Mrs. Chen nodded with approval. Good. Now I'm driving you home and you're going to rest for the remainder of today and all of tomorrow. No work, no thinking about road sense. Just rest. Your body needs to heal and your mind needs a break. Maya wanted to protest, but her arm hurt, her hip hurt, and she was suddenly very tired. She let Mrs. Chen drive her home. Her father had already called ahead, and Maya's mother had soup waiting. Maya ate, took pain medication the doctor had prescribed, and went to bed even though it was only 7 in the evening. She slept for 14 hours straight. When she finally woke up, it was late morning. Her arm still hurt, but her mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. She spent the day resting, watching TV, and thinking about the crash and the project. By evening, she had made a decision. She called Mrs. Chen. I want to continue with road sense, she said, but I want to do it the right way. Carefully and safely. If that means I don't finish in time for the exhibition in 2 weeks, then that's okay. I'd rather create something that actually works than rush to meet a deadline. I'm glad to hear that, Mrs. Chen said. That's very mature thinking. Now, when you come back to work, we're going to implement proper safety protocols. We'll redo every connection that looks questionable. We'll test every component individually before testing the complete system. And when we do test the complete system again, we'll do it in controlled conditions with professional safety measures. The next day, Maya returned to the shop. Her arm was still bandaged and moving hurt, but she could work. She and Mrs. Chen spent 3 full days examining the entire road sense system. They found 5 other solder connections that looked questionable. Maya redid all of them, taking her time, doing the work properly even though it was tedious. They also found 2 places where wires could potentially short-circuit if they rubbed against metal parts. Maya added protective covering. They discovered that one of the sensor mounts was slightly loose. Maya reinforced it. This careful, methodical work took time, but it was necessary. Every potential problem they found and fixed was one less thing that could cause another crash. While they worked, Mrs. Chen taught Maya about professional engineering practices. She explained why big companies had extensive testing protocols. She talked about safety margins and redundancy. She showed Maya how to document everything properly so that if something did go wrong, they could trace back and find the cause. Engineering isn't just about having good ideas, Mrs. Chen explained. It's about implementing those ideas safely and reliably. A brilliant design that fails in the real world is worthless. A simple design that works every time is valuable. Maya absorbed these lessons. She realized that she had been thinking like an amateur, focused on being first and being flashy. Mrs. Chen was teaching her to think like a professional, focused on being thorough and reliable. After 5 days of careful review and improvements, they were ready to test again, but this time they did it differently. Maya borrowed proper protective equipment from a motorcycle safety course, including a special jacket with armor and knee pads. They chose a closed private lot where there was no traffic and soft dirt on the sides in case she crashed. Again, Mrs. Chen insisted on being there with a first aid kit and her phone ready to call emergency services. Carlos was there too, watching nervously but trying to be supportive. Maya started slow, testing each function individually at low speeds. The sensors worked correctly. The computer processed data as expected. The suspension adjusted smoothly. Everything was functioning properly. She gradually increased speed and tried more challenging maneuvers. The system performed beautifully. After 2 hours of testing, Maya stopped and removed her helmet. She was smiling for the first time in days. "It works," she said. "It really works." "It works because you took the time to do it right," Mrs. Chen said. "Remember that lesson. Good engineering takes patience." Over the next week, Maya continued testing road sense in progressively more challenging conditions. She rode over rough pavement, through gravel, over speed bumps. She tested it in rain and on wet roads. Every time the system performed exactly as designed. It detected hazards, adjusted the suspension, and warned the rider appropriately. The day before the exhibition, Maya did a final full test. She rode for 2 hours, deliberately seeking out every type of road condition she could find. Road sense handled everything perfectly. She returned to the shop feeling confident and proud. That evening, she and Mrs. Chen prepared the presentation materials. They created a display board explaining how road sense worked. They printed statistics about motorcycle accidents and how many could potentially be prevented with better safety systems. They prepared a demonstration showing the system in action. Carlos helped them load everything into his truck. They would leave early the next morning to set up at the exhibition. As Maya locked up the storage room that night, she looked at the Honda CB750 with all her hard work attached to it. Win or lose tomorrow, she had created something real and valuable, something that could actually help people. She thought about Tyler and his friends. Part of her still wanted to see their faces when they realized what she had built. But Mrs. Chen's words echoed in her mind. She wasn't doing this to prove anything to them anymore. She was doing it because it mattered, because it was important, because she had the skill and knowledge to create something that could save lives. That realization made her feel stronger than any trophy ever could. The morning of the regional youth motorcycle exhibition was bright and clear. Maya woke up at 5 in the morning, too nervous to sleep any longer. She got dressed carefully, choosing clean jeans and a nice shirt. She wanted to look professional but still like herself. Her arm had mostly healed, though there was still a visible scar from the road rash. She decided not to hide it. That scar was part of her journey. By 6 o'clock, Maya, her father, and Mrs. Chen were loading the Honda CB750 into Carlos's truck. They secured it carefully, making sure road sense wouldn't be damaged during transport. Maya had a box with all her presentation materials, her notebooks, and backup components in case anything needed quick repair. The drive to the convention center took 45 minutes. Maya sat in the back seat, going over her presentation in her mind. She had practiced it dozens of times with Mrs. Chen, but her stomach still felt full of butterflies. She wasn't afraid of public speaking. She was afraid of failing after working so hard. She was afraid that road sense wouldn't work when it mattered most. They arrived at the convention center at 7:30. The exhibition didn't officially start until 10, but participants could set up their displays starting at 8. The convention center was huge, with high ceilings and bright lights. Maya could see people already starting to arrive with their motorcycles. Carlos drove the truck to the loading area, and they unloaded the Honda. Maya rode it slowly to her assigned exhibition space, which was in the Innovation category section. Around her, other young people were setting up their displays. She saw custom paint jobs, restored vintage bikes, and various modifications. Everything looked expensive and professional. Then she heard the familiar sound of multiple motorcycles arriving together. Her heart sank a little. Tyler and his friends had arrived. Their bikes were being unloaded from a large trailer. Each motorcycle gleamed in the bright lights, looking like they had just come from a showroom. Tyler's bike had new custom paint since Maya had last seen it, a complex design that must have cost thousands of dollars. Tyler spotted Maya setting up her display. He said something to his friends, and they all laughed. Then they started walking toward her exhibition space. Maya's hands tensed on the handlebars of the Honda, but she kept her face calm. Mrs. Chen, who was setting up the display board, noticed them coming and moved to stand next to Maya. Well, Tyler said as he approached, his voice loud enough for people nearby to hear. Look who decided to show up. Did you get lost on the way to the junkyard? His friends laughed right on cue, just like they always did. Maya didn't respond. She just continued positioning the Honda in the center of her space. Carlos was connecting the demonstration monitor that would show RoadSense data in real time. Tyler walked closer, examining the Honda with exaggerated interest. This old thing? You brought this to compete against real motorcycles? He pointed at RoadSense's sensor housing and the computer equipment mounted on the bike. What's all this ugly stuff attached to it? Did you raid a computer store? It's called Innovation, Mrs. Chen said calmly. Something you might not recognize since your parents buy all your modifications for you. Tyler's face got a little red. He wasn't used to adults standing up to him. Who are you? I'm Maya's technical advisor, Mrs. Chen said. And I suggest you move along before you embarrass yourself further. Tyler looked like he wanted to say something else, but Jessica pulled at his arm. Come on, Tyler, let's go set up. The judges will be here soon. Tyler gave Maya one more mocking look. Good luck. You'll need it with that piece of junk. Then he walked away with his friends, their laughter echoing across the exhibition hall. After they left, Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Don't let them get in your head, Mrs. Chen said. They're just scared kids hiding behind money and attitude. You have something real. Remember that. Maya nodded and went back to setting up. They arranged the display board to explain RoadSense clearly. They set up the monitor to show the system's data. They prepared handouts with technical specifications. By 9:30, everything was ready. At 10 o'clock, the exhibition officially opened to the public and judges. The convention center quickly filled with people. There were families, motorcycle enthusiasts, industry professionals, and journalists. The energy in the building was electric. Maya stood next to her exhibit, watching people walk by. Many glanced at the Honda but kept walking, drawn to the flashier custom bikes. A few stopped to read her display board. Meanwhile, Tyler's exhibit was crowded with people. His motorcycle was beautiful, there was no denying that. The custom paint job was artwork. The chrome accessories sparkled. People were taking photos. Tyler stood in the center of the attention, explaining the modifications that professionals had made to his bike. He looked confident and comfortable. Maya felt a familiar sinking feeling. Maybe this had been a mistake. Maybe she should have waited, refined RoadSense more, entered a different competition. Maybe she wasn't ready for this. Then Mrs. Chen appeared at her elbow with 2 cups of coffee. Stop comparing yourself to him, she said quietly. Your work speaks for itself. Be patient. At 11 o'clock, the judges began their rounds. There were 5 judges total. 3 were engineers from major motorcycle companies. 1 was a professional motorcycle racer. 1 was a safety advocate who had lost her husband in a motorcycle accident. They moved through the exhibition systematically, spending 15 minutes at each display. Maya watched them visit Tyler's exhibit first in the innovation section. Tyler's presentation was smooth and rehearsed. He talked about performance upgrades and aesthetic design. The judges nodded politely and took notes. After 15 minutes, they moved on to the next exhibit. It took 2 hours for the judges to reach Maya's space. By then, her nervousness had transformed into focused determination. When the 5 judges stood in front of her exhibit, she took a deep breath and began. Hello, my name is Maya Rodriguez, and I want to tell you about a problem that kills thousands of motorcyclists every year. She paused, making eye contact with each judge. Many motorcycle accidents happen because riders can't react fast enough to dangerous road conditions. Potholes, oil slicks, gravel, wet pavement. By the time a rider sees these hazards, it's often too late to avoid them safely. She gestured to the Honda. This is RoadSense, an intelligent, adaptive safety system that I designed and built over the past year and a half. It uses an array of sensors to scan the road ahead, detecting hazards before the rider encounters them. A computer processes this data in real time and automatically adjusts the motorcycle's suspension to handle the hazard safely. It also warns the rider through haptic feedback in the handlebars. One of the judges, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, stepped forward. You built this yourself? Yes, ma'am. With guidance from my technical advisor, Mrs. Chen, who is a retired engineer. But the design, the programming, and the assembly are all my work. Can you demonstrate it? Asked another judge, a younger man who worked for a Japanese motorcycle company. Yes, I have a test course set up. Maya had arranged cones and rubber mats to simulate different road conditions. She put on her helmet and started the Honda. As she rode slowly through the course, the monitor displayed RoadSense's data in real time. The judges watched the screen, seeing the sensors detect obstacles and the suspension adjust automatically. Maya completed the course and returned to the judges. They had moved closer to the monitor, studying the data with serious expressions. Then they started asking questions, technical questions, hard questions about sensor range, processing algorithms, power consumption, safety protocols, and failure modes. Maya answered each question carefully and honestly. When she didn't know something, she admitted it instead of making something up. When a judge pointed out a potential problem she hadn't considered, she acknowledged it and explained how she might address it in future versions. The safety advocate judge, whose name was Ms. Patricia Walsh, had tears in her eyes. My husband died because he hit an oil slick he didn't see on a highway. He lost control and crashed into a barrier. She looked at Maya with intense emotion. If he had had something like this, he might still be alive. I'm so sorry for your loss, Maya said sincerely. That's exactly why I built RoadSense. Too many people die in accidents that could be prevented. Dr. Sarah Kim, one of the engineers, was examining the sensor housing closely. She was the chief engineer for a major motorcycle manufacturer. This is remarkable work, she said. Our company has been researching similar technology for years, but we've focused on making it a premium feature for expensive bikes. You've approached it differently? Yes, ma'am, Maya said. I wanted to create something that could be affordable for average riders. Something that could be added to existing motorcycles, not just built into new, expensive models. Motorcycle safety shouldn't be only for rich people. Dr. Kim looked at Maya thoughtfully. How old are you? 17, ma'am. And you taught yourself all this? The sensor technology, the programming, the mechanical engineering. I learned from online courses, technical articles, and books from the library. And Mrs. Chen taught me professional engineering practices. The judges talked among themselves quietly for a moment. Then Dr. Kim pulled out a business card and handed it to Maya. Regardless of how the judging goes today, I want to talk to you about your technology. My company is very interested in affordable safety systems. Can I contact you next week? Maya took the card with shaking hands. Yes, absolutely. The other judges also gave Maya their contact information. The professional racer wanted to test RoadSense himself. Another engineer wanted to discuss the algorithms she had developed. They spent almost 40 minutes at Maya's exhibit, much longer than they had spent at any other display Maya had seen. After they left, Maya felt like she might collapse from the tension. Mrs. Chen hugged her tightly. You did brilliantly. I'm so proud of you. Carlos, who had been watching from a distance, came over with a huge smile. Mija, you were amazing. The way you answered their questions, you sounded like a professional engineer. Because she is a professional engineer, Mrs. Chen said. Age and experience are just numbers. Skill and knowledge are what matter. The rest of the day passed in a blur. More people came to see RoadSense after word spread about the judge's long visit. Journalists interviewed Maya. Other participants stopped by to ask questions. Some were genuinely interested, others were skeptical. But everyone was talking about the teenager who had built an intelligent safety system. Maya noticed Tyler and his friends watching from a distance. They weren't laughing anymore. They looked confused and maybe a little threatened. Tyler's exhibit, despite its beautiful appearance, was just a collection of expensive modifications anyone could buy. Maya's exhibit was actual innovation, something new that had never existed before. At 4 o'clock, the judges gathered on a central stage to announce the winners. Everyone in the exhibition hall crowded around to listen. They announced winners in various categories: Best Restoration, Best Custom Paint, Best Vintage Bike. Tyler won second place in the custom bike category. He walked up to accept his trophy with a smile, but it looked forced. Then they reached the innovation category. This year's innovation category had exceptional entries, Dr. Kim announced. She was speaking into a microphone so everyone could hear. We saw creative modifications, interesting designs, and impressive technical work. But one entry stood out not just for its technical achievement, but for its potential to save lives. Maya felt her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone around her could hear it. Dr. Kim continued speaking into the microphone. The winner of the innovation category is Maya Rodriguez for her RoadSense Intelligent Adaptive Safety System. The crowd applauded as Maya walked toward the stage in a daze. She couldn't believe this was real. Mrs. Chen was clapping proudly. Her father had tears running down his face. But Dr. Kim wasn't finished. Additionally, the judges have decided to create a special recognition award this year for an innovation with exceptional potential industry impact. This award also goes to Maya Rodriguez. The applause grew louder. Maya climbed the stairs to the stage, her legs feeling shaky. Dr. Kim handed her 2 trophies. They were heavier than Maya expected, made of metal and glass. "Congratulations," Dr. Kim said quietly. "You've accomplished something truly special." Maya managed to say thank you, though her voice barely worked. Someone took her photo holding the trophies. Then she walked back down from the stage to where Mrs. Chen and her father were waiting. They hugged her, and Maya finally let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. She had won. Not just won, but won with special recognition. All those months of work, all the late nights, the crash, the doubt, everything had led to this moment. But the day wasn't over. As Maya returned to her exhibit with her trophies, she noticed several people waiting to talk to her. Over the next hour, 3 different representatives from motorcycle companies approached her. They all wanted to discuss RoadSense. They asked about licensing, about manufacturing, about patents. They gave her business cards and asked to schedule meetings. Dr. Kim returned with a formal business proposal. "My company is very interested in developing RoadSense for the consumer market," she explained. "We would like to license your technology. That means we would pay you for the right to use your design, and you would get a percentage of every unit we sell. We would also like to hire you as a consultant during development." Maya looked at Mrs. Chen, who was reading the proposal carefully. "This is legitimate," Mrs. Chen said, "and generous. You should definitely consider it, but we should have a lawyer review it first before you sign anything." Maya serviced Tyler's motorcycle that afternoon. She did thorough, professional work, just as she would for any customer. She found a few problems that his expensive mechanic had missed and fixed them. When Tyler returned at 6, she explained everything she had done and charged him the standard shop rate. Tyler looked at the bill and then at his motorcycle, which was running better than it had in months. "You really know what you're doing," he said. It might have been the first completely genuine thing he had ever said to her. "Yes," Maya said simply. "I do." As Tyler rode away, Maya realized something important. She no longer felt any anger toward him. His opinion didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she had stayed true to herself. She had worked hard, believed in her abilities, and created something valuable. The mockery and doubt from others had hurt, but they hadn't stopped her. That evening, after the shop closed, Maya went to her research space. She had started working on a new project, an emergency alert system that could automatically call for help if a rider crashed. It was even more ambitious than RoadSense, requiring integration with smartphones and GPS technology. Mrs. Chen stopped by, as she often did these days. She looked at Maya's new sketches and nodded with approval. "Another life-saving innovation. You're developing quite a reputation in the industry." "I just want to help people," Maya said. "Every time I read about a motorcycle accident, I think about what technology could have prevented it." "That's what makes you special," Mrs. Chen said. "You're not doing this for money or fame. You're doing it because it matters." They worked together for a few hours, discussing the technical challenges of the new system. Then Mrs. Chen went home, and Maya stayed a little longer, lost in her designs and calculations. Before she left for the night, Maya walked through the main shop, turning off lights. She passed the workbench where Tyler had knocked over her toolbox all those months ago. She remembered how humiliated she had felt, how worthless those teenagers had made her feel. But they had been wrong about her, completely wrong. The girl with greasy hands wasn't worthless. She was brilliant. She was capable. She was changing the world in her own way, one invention at a time. Maya locked up the shop and rode her bicycle home under the streetlights. Her hands were stained with grease as they usually were, but she didn't try to hide them anymore. Those stains represented work skill and achievement. They represented someone who built the future instead of just talking about it. A year later, RoadSense officially launched. The first units were installed on motorcycles across the country. Within the first month, the company received reports of 3 accidents that had been avoided because the system warned riders about hazards they hadn't seen. 3 people who might have been injured or killed were safe because of Maya's invention. When Maya heard about those reports, she cried. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming relief and joy. This was why she had worked so hard. This was why all the mockery, the exhaustion, the doubts, and the struggles had been worth it. She was 18 now, preparing for college. She had been accepted to several top engineering schools, all offering scholarships. She would study mechanical engineering, learning even more about how to create technologies that helped people. But no matter how far her education took her, no matter what other inventions she created in her life, Maya would always remember the girl in the greasy coveralls who refused to give up, who turned mockery into motivation, who proved that real intelligence and real value had nothing to do with money or appearance or what other people thought. The game hadn't just changed for Maya. It had changed for everyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or mocked for being different. Maya's story became inspiration for other young people, especially girls, who wanted to pursue engineering and technology despite facing discouragement. And it all started in a small repair shop, with a girl who had greasy hands and a dream to make the world a little bit safer. Of course, Dr. Kim said, take your time. But I want you to know that we're serious about this. Your technology could save thousands of lives, and we want to help make that happen. 2 other companies made similar offers. One was a startup focused on motorcycle safety equipment. The other was an established company that made accessories and aftermarket parts. Both wanted to work with Maya. Maya felt overwhelmed. Just this morning, she had been worried that people would laugh at her invention. Now she had multiple companies competing to work with her. It didn't seem real. As the exhibition began winding down around 5 o'clock, Maya was packing up her display when she noticed Tyler approaching. He was alone this time, without his usual entourage. He walked slowly, his hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. Hey, he said when he reached her exhibit. It was the first time he had ever spoken to her without mockery in his voice. Hey, Maya replied cautiously, continuing to pack her materials. Tyler looked at the Honda with RoadSense attached to it. He seemed to be struggling with what to say. Finally, he spoke. That thing you built. It's actually pretty cool. Maya stopped packing and looked at him. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an admission that he had been cruel to her for months. But coming from Tyler, those words were significant. She could see the effort it took for him to say them. Thank you, Maya said simply. She didn't need more than that from him. She didn't need his validation or his friendship. She had already proven everything she needed to prove, not to him but to herself. Tyler nodded awkwardly, then walked away. Maya watched him go, feeling something unexpected. Not satisfaction or revenge, but something closer to pity. Tyler had everything handed to him, but he would never know the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. He would never know the pride of solving a problem that seemed impossible. His expensive motorcycle was beautiful, but it was just an object. RoadSense was an achievement. Mrs. Chen helped Maya finish packing. Carlos loaded everything back into his truck. As they prepared to leave, Maya took one last look at the convention center. She thought about how nervous she had been that morning, how she had worried about failing, how she had felt inadequate compared to all the flashy exhibits around her. But she had learned something important. Real value wasn't about appearance or money. It was about substance. It was about solving real problems. It was about creating something that mattered. The grease on her hands, which Tyler and his friends had mocked so many times, wasn't a sign of weakness. It was evidence of someone who built things instead of just talking about them. The drive home was happy and exhausted. Carlos kept telling Maya how proud he was. Mrs. Chen talked about the next steps, about lawyers and patents and business decisions. Maya listened but mostly just stared out the window, holding her trophies, trying to process everything that had happened. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. Mrs. Chen connected Maya with a lawyer who specialized in intellectual property. They filed patents for RoadSense, protecting Maya's design from being copied. The lawyer also helped Maya negotiate with the companies that wanted to license her technology. After careful consideration and many discussions, Maya decided to work with Dr. Kim's company. They offered the best terms and seemed most committed to making RoadSense affordable for average riders, rather than just a luxury feature. The contract they signed gave Maya royalties on every unit sold, enough money to pay for her college education with plenty left over. The company also hired Maya as a consultant. She would work with their engineering team to refine RoadSense and prepare it for mass production. They offered her a part-time position that would work around her school schedule. After she graduated, she would have the option to join the company full-time as a junior engineer. Maya's father's repair shop saw changes too. Some of the money from the licensing deal went into upgrading the shop. Carlos was able to buy better equipment and hire an assistant, taking some of the workload off himself. The storage room where Maya had developed RoadSense was transformed into a proper research and development space. Maya continued working on improvements to the system and started developing other safety innovations. News about Maya's invention spread beyond the motorcycle community. Local newspapers ran stories about the teenage girl who had built a safety system that could save lives. A few national publications picked up the story. Maya did several interviews, always feeling awkward about the attention but understanding that it helped raise awareness about motorcycle safety. The story even reached her high school. Students who had never noticed Maya before suddenly knew who she was. Some were genuinely happy for her. Others seemed jealous. Maya didn't care much either way. She had never needed popularity. She had needed respect, and now she had earned it through her own work. Mr. Harrison, her physics teacher who had sponsored her independent study, asked her to give a presentation to his classes about RoadSense. Maya agreed, though she was nervous about speaking in front of her peers. But when she stood at the front of the classroom, explaining how she had taught herself advanced engineering concepts and built a complex safety system, she saw something change in the students' eyes. Some of them looked inspired. Some looked at her with new respect. A few students approached her after class asking how they could learn to do similar projects. One girl, a freshman named Jennifer, waited until everyone else had left. She was shy and spoke quietly. "I like working on computers and building things," she said. "But people at school make fun of me for it. They say it's weird for a girl." Maya remembered feeling that way. She remembered being mocked for her interests. "Don't listen to them," she told Jennifer. "Follow your interests. Learn everything you can. The people who make fun of you just don't understand, but someday, you'll build something amazing and then they'll understand." 6 months after the exhibition, RoadSense entered its final testing phase before production. The company had refined Maya's design, making it more efficient and easier to manufacture. But the core technology, the intelligent system that detected hazards and adjusted suspension, was still Maya's creation. They planned to launch the product in a year, with Maya's name listed as the primary inventor. One Saturday afternoon, Maya was working in the shop when she heard a familiar motorcycle sound outside. She looked up and was surprised to see Tyler parking his bike. He walked into the shop, still looking uncomfortable but more genuine than before. "I need to get my bike serviced," he said. "My regular mechanic is booked up. Can you do it?" Maya was about to say they were too busy, but Carlos came out of the office. "Of course we can help you," he said professionally. "Maya, can you do a full service on this bike?" Maya looked at her father, then at Tyler, then back at her father. She understood what Carlos was doing. He was giving her the choice. She could turn Tyler away, making him face the consequences of how he had treated her. Or she could rise above it. "Sure," Maya said. "I can fit you in. Should be ready by this evening." Tyler nodded and handed her his keys. "Thanks." He paused, then added, "I saw an article about RoadSense. They said it's going into production next year." "That's right," Maya said. "That's really impressive." He seemed to be trying to say more, but he didn't know how. Finally, he just said, "I'll come back at 6 to pick up the bike." After he left, Carlos put his hand on Maya's shoulder. "You didn't have to take that job. I know, Maya said. But we're a repair shop. We help people with their motorcycles. That's what we do. It doesn't matter if they're nice or mean, rich or poor. Carlos smiled proudly. You're growing into a very wise person, mija.